So there's a road that leads us to Easter, and it's not like a new road. It's a road that we've all been down before. It's a road that kind of illuminates stuff. It kind of reminds me of a road that we used to take as a kid. It was the road from my house in Indiana to my grandparents' house in Illinois. And it was one of those roads that was very familiar, but at the same time very tedious and difficult. There was always a story that kind of illuminated itself on the road, but at the same point, no matter how many times I went on the journey, the question would always be the same, and the question is, are we there yet? But the road does have stories. There are stories that we cherish, and there are stories that we wish would just go away and never return again. So this year, as we take this road to Easter, which is that ultimate moment where God sends his son who has already been on the earth and he is killed, but then raises from the dead. That story, that this road to Easter is hopefully one that we can arrive this year a little bit lighter than maybe in years past. Because here's what I know about me, and here's what I know about you. We all have something that it's time for us to say goodbye to. And this will be a road that will help us to do that. Maybe it's an addiction. Perhaps it's a memory. It could be a hurt. Maybe it's a job or a toxic relationship. Either way, we need to do this. So why am I doing this? I kind of feel compelled to do this. And let me be clear. It would be a lot easier for me to just do kind of, hey, let's all open up to the book of Ephesians. And we read a few verses and we talk about it for a while. Then we end with, well, I guess we'll have to pick it up there next week. It'd be 1,000 times easier if we just kind of stayed and did that rhythm. But to be honest to you, I think it's probably time that we carry this responsibility for our world, your world. Because there is an intersection on the road that where our faith and the world that we live in and the world that our family engages in and Scripture all coalesces and has something to say. And it's in that moment where I think we need to kind of pause and just reflect for a minute. Because our current situation, I don't need to illuminate our current situation. Think about it though, but from the pandemic to inflation, certainly things with Russia, cultural twists and turns that you find out that maybe you were wrong or insensitive and you weren't even aware of it. And with this, all of the complexities of this comes an opportunity for the church and the people of the church who call themselves Christians. Because I think one of the biggest challenges that some of you have felt over the last couple of years is that your politics or your social views have somehow become the filter through which you view your world, rather than it being the other way around, where faith is the lens that views your world. And yet others, it's not culture and politics that has dominated your lens. It's been your own hurt and pain or addiction that you've chosen to see your world through, instead of flipping it around the other way, where faith becomes the lens through which you see your addiction, hurt, and pains. And I really think that if Christians, if we could get that reversed, wow. Because Jesus was not far left or far right or culture this or culture that. He was a whole other thing. And so here we go. I want to dive right in here because where we're heading as we start this journey begins in a passage of Scripture that Jesus is really kind of hard on his followers and his disciples as he begins to share this. And so I want to start this, and so here's what I want to do. Let me just ask a question that will kind of give us context as to where we're going here today. When you hear about like a super wealthy person or a famous person going bankrupt, what do you think when you hear that? Isn't it true? Isn't it true? My thought is, and if you don't feel this way, then you can just judge me for saying this. That's fine. Whenever I see a super wealthy person or a famous person going bankrupt, my next thought is usually, man, I wouldn't let that happen to me. If I had that much money, there's just no way I would let that happen to me. But what about, what was your response when some big name companies, even big name companies around here who they kind of went bankrupt and you remember words like Circuit City? You remember Circuit City? I mean, that was the place back in the day, right? Or Kmart, Toys R Us, right? Sears. And do you know how hard it is to become a household name? Do you know how hard it is to have your brand, your image, your likeness become a household name? And I always kind of think, if you can pull that off, surely you're smart enough to not go bankrupt. And so if you're a business owner in here, when you watch that take place, what is the subtle message that you send yourself? Man, if I was in charge of that, not on my watch, that wouldn't have happened. Well, let's switch over to government. There's one that's not controversial, right? You look at the United States of America, and right now we have like staggering debt, we have staggering inflation, we have poverty that disqualifies like 40% of our country from even paying taxes, right? And we have gas prices that I wish there was like a bike path out to GatheringPoint, because who knows where that animal is stopping? And we begin to pause and we go, how does the land of opportunity become now the land of entitlement and culture wars? Like, how does that happen? And all of that has led us to the place where we go, this is now the land of not my fault, not my fault. And so we have the same reaction, we have the same thought about rich people who maybe have squandered it. We have the same thought about maybe our government. We have the same part of our companies. We have the same part of all of our politicians and all these things that we kind of all move and coalesce at the same exact solution, where we go, that would never have happened on my watch. So here's what I know about you. If I were to go around and ask you, what should we do about our economy? What should we do about our government? What should we do with world problems? What should we do now? Here's what I know about you. You have the answer, right? And if someone would just listen to you, I'm sure if you had the opportunity, we would be able to fix it. But I think this is what we may have missed. That our financial crisis may not be financial. And the root of our cultural issues may not be cultural. They're symptoms. They're symptoms of something that's much deeper. Your personal hurt and pain is a symptom. And this is usually true in the realm of personal finances too, right? If you're out of money or you have a lot of debt, that's usually a symptom of something that's happened before, right? There's decisions or things that have happened to you that, you just didn't wake up one day with money problems. That's just not how it works on a personal level. So then it probably doesn't work the same way in other organizations as well, does it? Because here's what happens. We all ignore the fundamentals until something falls apart. You talk to any drug addict or alcoholic who's gotten to recovery, it's not until they run out of money or someone leaves them and it's all taken away that they begin to realize that what they're reaping is what they have sown, which is something that Jesus said, because our problems that usually we have, not just nationally or culturally or economically, it stems from kind of an abuse of some of our prosperity that we've had. And that's a really difficult test to pass because, personally, corporately, nationally, there's consequences to this, and that means that we have a discipline problem, right? Because the more you have of something, the less disciplined you are with it. Our debt problem isn't a national issue. It's because we can't tell ourselves no, right? Think of all the things you need right now. So we've reached into our future and we've borrowed from the present, and we have this entitlement problem. And I'm not referring to like entitlement spending or anything like this. It's just when something gets taken away from us, we act like we're spoiled. And so at a personal level, and we kind of maybe have a little bit of a greed problem, maybe. But there's a leadership level, not just nationally, individually. We have a failure of the nerve problem. And when a leader knows when you know what needs to be done in your life, when you know what needs to be done in your family, when you know what needs to be done in your organization, your business that you lead, when you know what needs to be done, but you can't do it because you're afraid of the short-term consequences, so you hesitate, that's a failure of the nerve. When you get frustrated because you know politicians are trying to keep their base or their support or their funding, it's a failure of the nerve. This is where it shows up the most. This just baffles me. This is why some of you don't discipline your children. It's because of a failure of the nerve. And I'm not saying abuse your children, but it is okay to ground them. Some are terrified to do that. And so what happens is we begin to train ourselves to not address stuff. So we just keep paying forward in the future. And because what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so what becomes separated becomes entitled. And so Jesus begins to move right into the middle of this. See, it would have just been easier if we'd have said, let's just look at Ephesians and go from there. Jesus goes right into the middle of this, and when he goes into this, he picks it up. And right when we get ready to pick up another rock and throw it at a news anchor, or pick up another rock and throw it at social media, or pick up another rock and throw it at our, least favorite congressional representative, Jesus speaks into the fray. And instead of taking a side, and this is why we don't, and instead of picking a side, Jesus dresses down both sides when he says this. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3, verses 5. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to your own eye? Is it because what Sears did is more obvious than what you're doing? Is it because of what Toys R Us did is more obvious than what you're doing? Is it because what Congress is doing is more obvious than what's in your own eye? Is it because of what you see all around you is more obvious to you than what's taking place in your own eye? Is it because when you look at others' situations and go, that would never have happened on my watch, it makes you feel a little bit more superior? And it's more fun, isn't it? I mean, who doesn't like that, to just be like, right? I like to be right. Don't you like to be right? Because the moment that I can point to other people and other situations and other organizations and other people's problems, here's immediately what happens to me. I go, I don't have anything I need to do because I'm not that bad. Right? And so I think it's fascinating that Jesus is, he is brutal in these verses. I think his point is that something we should notice, that he's not on a fault-finding message. He's inviting us to the mirror, which is terrifying. Jesus says this. These are Jesus' words. They're probably read. If you are in a paged Bible right now, these are read words. And he said, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when at the same time there is a plank in your own eye? Now, I love the Message paraphrase translation because it says 2x4. How can you point out the speck in your brother's eye when you have a 2x4 in your own eye? And then we get these, every Christian, these are your favorite words right here. Oh, you hypocrite. Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you. Judging others before looking in the mirror? Are you kidding me? First, and here's our first instruction that we begin. We're just getting ready for this journey too. First, take the plank out of your own eye. And when something about you bothers me, when something about you bothers me, I need to take a long, hard look in the mirror at myself first, because here's something that will happen, because Jesus said, here's a promise. You want to know what Jesus promised you? If you will take a long, hard look in the mirror at yourself first, this is a promise of Jesus, right? Then you will see clearly. It's the long, hard gaze in the mirror that enables you to put your faith before your pain. It's the long, hard look in the mirror that allows you to put your faith before your views. It's the long, hard look in the mirror that allows you to put your faith before your politics, before anything else. It allows that to invert how you normally go about your process. It's the long, hard look in the mirror. If not, you will justify. And if we could just pause and talk about our pain, I think the church could get this right, because we could maybe see better than we've seen before. And what would be the purpose? So that we could remove the speck out of our brother's eye. Because something must be done when we are pointing fingers at each other, and maybe not individually, maybe it is, maybe it's in your family, you have people pointing your fingers. Normally when people start pointing their finger at each other, somebody gets their eye poked, right? That's typically what happens, right? And so this is what we do, and this is why we're going down this thing called the Goodbye Road, which leads us to Easter. And this journey begins with me and we versus all the theys that are out there. I mean, think of all the theys that we blame. Because here's what we know. Entitled people always look for someone to blame. Mature, solutions-oriented people always look for something that they can do. And so for the church to see clearly and point the way forward, we must remove the speck from our own eyes. Both as a church, we've got to do this work. As a family, you're going to need to do this work. As an individual, you're going to need to do this work. Because recovery begins with us, the church, right? Your family, you, not they. And so, I'm just going to let you know this is probably going to be, if not already, this might be a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because there may be some stuff in your family that needs to be confronted, but you're afraid. There may be some things at work that you need to address, but you're terrified of the consequences. There may be things you need to do as a community leader that it's just become easier to blame. There may be things personally that it's time to address. But it's just become easier to point the finger. And so what we want to do is that if everyone who claimed Christ, now, if you're not a Christian, I got great news for you. If you're not a Christian, you get a free pass. If you are a Christian, these are not suggestions of Jesus. This is the greatest invitation of Jesus. And we will follow him all the way to the cross. Think of it this way. If you got your personal finances in order, it would be felt immediately, wouldn't it? I mean, wouldn't it be great if you got your personal finance? I mean, that would be felt immediately. But instead, we oftentimes will yell at the TV or yell at your social media, or, it's always more fun to poke at the speck in Congress's eye, isn't it? I mean, I got to be honest. It's not hard, right? It's not hard. But right now, there's not much we can do about that. So let's begin with where we can make a difference, which is ourselves. The way we could live where we wish everyone else could live, so we could do that, because the Goodbye Road begins with we, right, and me, rather than all of the theys. And so this morning, I thought it would be helpful, I thought it would be wise if we just paused for a minute so that I could begin to share with you and begin to explain that this road that we're about ready to take, back in the day, they would call this road the Via Dolorosa, which was the road that led to the cross, the road that led there. But what we want to do today is we want to provide some tangible handles, because here's what I've found, and this is what I've listened to, and this is what I've come to learn. It's hard to know what we're supposed to say goodbye to if we've never done it before. The other thing that's really challenging in these kinds of situations is, how far do I go? How far do I need to go before real change is taking place in my life if I've never really seen that happen before? I get this all the time. I would love to trust Jesus. I would love to give Jesus my life. I would love to change the things in my life. What on earth does that look like? Do I just close my eyes and say some words? Is it like a magic wish? Is there something that I begin to kind of hope for and wish? I mean, is it when you wish upon a star, kind of Disney? I mean, how does this transition into something that actually is meaningful and lasting and substantive? And so this morning, I want to introduce you to somebody who I've known for a long time. And he chose, after some events took place in his life, he decided that he would head down this goodbye road almost 2 years ago. And as he began to take steps on this journey, there began to be things that emerged. And what you're going to watch and listen to today is that he found a place in his life where it stopped becoming the they. And he began to go, God, maybe you should start with the plank in my eye. And I got to be honest with you this morning. This is what we want for each of you as we head down the journey to Easter. So this morning, I want you to turn your attention to the screen, and I want you to meet Adam. And if you've ever watched online, and if you've ever downloaded the app, Adam is the one here at GatheringPoint who produces all of our online content. So I want you to listen to his story today.
My name's Adam Oyervides, and about 22 months ago, I was at a really low point in my life. I developed a depression that was driven by anger, bitterness, and cynicism that left me in a place where I felt alone and dead inside. So it doesn't come as a surprise that my wife felt like she needed to find a new path and separate herself from the spiral that I was going down. It was at that moment that I had to make a decision. Am I going to continue to live this life, or am I going to use this moment as a catalyst to change my life? But I'm getting ahead of myself. My story didn't start 22 months ago. My story started a long, long time ago. When I was younger, my dad left our family. I can still vividly recall the red S10 pickup truck leaving the driveway packed full of tools. While that's not the last time that shame, sorrow, and loneliness would be in my life, that's the beginning of my story. That's a story about a boy who didn't know what went wrong, what happened. Why did he leave? What had I done to cause this? Why was this my fault? I don't know at what point, but at some point in there, I had resolved to not have to experience that kind of pain or loss ever again in my life. So I put in place some walls, and I developed some coping skills so that I would never have to feel that shame, sorrow, or loneliness again. When I was a young teenager, my mom remarried. This time she married a man who was bitter, angry, vulgar, and abusive. I spent a lot of time avoiding my home. I'd become removed, secluded. I didn't want to be hurt again. Fortunately, I had the grandparents who lived close, and I would spend many nights and weekends over at their home. My grandparents are the reason why I was involved in the church. They made sure we were there anytime the doors were open. So when my grandparents passed away, it was the church that I went back to. They were my people. They became my family. I'm so thankful for the kindness and generosity that they showed me in those moments in my life, taking me into their homes, feeding me, giving me a respite from the chaos that was consuming my life. It was because of that kindness and generosity that I felt like I wanted to serve in the church. As a teenager, I felt a call to ministry. So working with my local pastor, I applied to Olivet and pursued God's call. In the fall of 2004, I came to Bourbonnais. I thought Olivet would be the opportunity I needed in my life to finally escape. I excelled in class, but I was seeking after the knowledge that would get me a good grade and not the wisdom that would change my life. After learning about Jesus and his expectations for our lives, I became cynical. I couldn't wrap my mind around the idea of the gap between who I was and who I was supposed to be. I couldn't forget the story that started when I was a little boy on that porch. No one wanted me, and there was nothing I could do right. Those in my life who were closest to me were the ones that suffered the most. Not only could I not measure up, but they couldn't either. So, like I said, it really wasn't a surprise that my wife made the decision to move on. Really, it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is what I had expected from my life. So how was this any different? That brings me back to that moment 22 months ago. The moment where I had to decide, is this how I'm going to live my life? Or am I going to change my life? Christ came so that we could have life and live it to the full. I think he's in the business of changing stories. And I think he's changed my story. No, I know he's changed my story. I am no longer alone. I do not consider myself an orphan. I am a child of God. This season of Lent, we are beginning to go down this road called the Goodbye Road. And there's some things in my life that I know I need to say goodbye to. First, I need to say goodbye, and I want to say goodbye to that man who was angry, bitter, cynical, and alone. Second, I need to say goodbye to that story. I need to say goodbye to the narrative that says, you're not good enough, you can't do anything right, and nobody wants you. God wants me. Finally, the last thing I need to say goodbye to is the shame that my story holds. My past can no longer cloud my present. It does not cast a shadow over my future because I belong to Jesus, the one who gives me peace, the one who loves me, the one who has abundant life for me.
And that is the Goodbye Road. And I want you to join us on this journey because I think it's time. So this morning as we close, I'll pray in a minute and we're going to sing this morning, but I want you to kind of go through those areas of your life where am I blaming and where am I making other people suffer? And what is it time for me to say goodbye to? And I know the thought of that is going to create anxiety. The thought of that will create this unnerving stress of what ifs. But if we listen to Adam well, it's time to say goodbye. So this morning, if you would like to, at some point, there'll be a few songs that we're going to sing together. If you want to get up and light a candle, because there's just a dark space, and maybe today you just need to find the darkest spot in your life and shine a light and light a candle and ask Jesus, Jesus, I need you to shine some light into this dark place. Maybe for you, it's beginning to maybe write a word or a person's name or initials of something you need to say goodbye to. Maybe it's writing out the word of the hurt or the pain or the suffering that you've gone through. Whatever it is, maybe you just need to put that on the cross today and say, Jesus, I'm gonna try this. this move to Easter to join you on the Goodbye Road. And then, like every Sunday, if you want to take communion, there's communion located at each one of the stations, and there's also gluten-free communion at each one of the stations too. Just look for the little placard that lets you know where that's at, and you can take and just be reminded of what Jesus has done. And for those of you who have already kind of headed off on the Goodbye Road, maybe today you just want to take communion and thank God. Thank God that he doesn't leave us, but he invites us to come with us on a journey because we are his sons and his daughters. Can I pray with you this morning? Father, this morning we do not want to just stand still. We don't want our anger and frustration with the world, our nation, the economy, our hurt, our pain, our addictions. We don't want that to consume us. So God, what do we need to do? Would you help to illuminate just a little bit today? Would you crack the door on this so that we can begin to learn what this goodbye road is all about? And would you hold us close as we take steps closer to you? It's in your name we pray. Amen. They're going to sing. You're free to respond.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you love the content you heard and you'd like to know when the new content becomes available, scroll down and like and subscribe to our channel. Again, thanks so much for being here today, and we can't wait to see you next week.